Ki ka mau ka whakahi e karapoti ana i a mātou, tū tonu, ki te whare e tū nei, tēnā koe. Ka huri o ki whakaro, ki ka korohi, kua karo ke waikanu i a tātou. Ina rā, ki te tini takata, ko patua ki parihi tini, te whahuia ka marua, ko hikina e te kupeko saramaingi. Haere, haere, e au te moa. Tātou ki a rātou, tātou ki a tātou. E mihi ana ki a koutou, ko tai mai nei ki te ako, ki te wānanga tahi, ki te wawata tahi, mo te herenga kore o Rees Tini, no reira, a te mihi pia koutou. Hotira ki a koe, ki tō koutou, kai kōrero a te kōnei, nei a te pui whakaukita a rere. A big mihi to everyone this evening. I just opened by sending some gratitude to the manga and to the whare here that are sheltering us, and sent our whakaro off to those that we've lost in between us, but also obviously to the many people in Palestine that have been lost over the last several months. And then just a massive thank you to you all for coming here to learn, to discuss, and to hope for a free Palestine. Big thank you to our kai kōrero as well, our speaker for tonight, for coming along. We'll start with a karakia to open the space, and then I'll hand it to Kirsty to take it from there. Whaere warewa ko te karuru I taure warewa ko te karurua. Taure warewa ka patu ki tuātea, e tuapua te tuātea. Ka te reki te kai karukaru e, kai ke panuku, kai te whakaroa, whaimie, wie, tai kai.
Kia ora.
I don't so much, just thanks so much to everyone for coming. I think we're all quite overwhelmed by the numbers, so apologies if you missed out on a seat, but what a great thing to miss out on a seat for because people are showing up. So we have Professor Mazin here at the end of his 7-week tour of Aotearoa, so we're so grateful to have him here tonight. He's going to talk for 30 to 40 minutes about how what's happening in the Middle East is affecting us globally, and then the floor will open for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please ask him. He's happy to answer our questions. And over to you, Mazin.
There's a couple of empty chairs in the front, and people in the back can also come and sit here, more comfortable on the floor. We're like Palestinians, and we sit on the floor. So there's one more chair here, and there's less spaces. Sorry for those of you who are standing, but this is truly an honor for me that so many people are interested, especially in a tourist town, and especially when you have the Slide Festival, which you could have attended instead of coming here. But anyway, I'll try to be brief for the sake of those who are standing. So maybe I sit down because it will be easier for me to change the slides. But very quickly, I want to talk about Palestine, what's happening in Palestine, and why it's happening, and where we are going, basically, and why it's important even for people in Aotearoa to see what's going on. Palestine is this geographic area where humans migrated out of Africa to the rest of the world, as you see on the map on the top. So actually all your ancestors are Palestinian, whether you like that or not. But anyways, it remains this land bridge. Even birds migrate from Eurasia to Africa through Palestine. 500 million birds migrate. Our land is very rich, lots of habitats, lots of natural areas, a lot of wildlife, a lot of species of plants and animals. We actually have more plant species than there are in the whole of the United Kingdom in this very tiny area, which is 27,000 square kilometer about 1/10 the size of New Zealand. Because of this richness in habitats, flora and fauna, this is part of the Fertile Crescent where humans developed agriculture, where we first domesticated plants and animals, plants like olives, wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas, and so on. And animals, of course, like goats and sheep and camels. But when people domesticated animals, they had more time on their hand, so they invented things like the alphabet. The alphabet that you use actually come from our ancestors, yours and mine, the people of that region, what's called the land of Canaan, or Canaan, you say in Arabic. And so they is because of Aleph, the bull with the two horns, the B is from Beit, which is a house, and that's the origin of both the Latin alphabet and also the Arabic and other alphabets. And these are the people of the land, the indigenous people of Palestine, just like indigenous people everywhere. They have their own costumes and culture, etc. This is what we look like. If you want, the woman on the right from Bethlehem with her baby, that's what Jesus and his mom would have looked like. Not blue-eyed, white skin. Anyway, this is from my village, Beit Sahur, the shepherd's field, where the shepherds heard the angels sing, went up to Bethlehem where Jesus was born. So this group of people here is my family and relatives and friends. Our village is about 70% Christian, 30% Muslim. This is my grandmother walking down the steps of the old house in our village. Fortunately for us, this house still stands. Unlike most ancient houses in Palestine, they were destroyed by the Zionist project, and I'll come to that in a minute. My background is both biology, and also medical genetics. I was professor in medical schools at universities like Duke and Yale University. And in medicine, we say take a patient history, take symptoms, make the right diagnosis. That's the pillars of medicine, if you want. And then based on that diagnosis, you offer therapy, number 4. And then you tell the patient, number 5, what is going to happen in the future. If we follow the same pillars of modern medicine on issues of social phenomena and political problems, we can say, what about this patient? What's the history of this patient in Palestine? Well, I said that patient who has lived in harmony with nature, never had problems, rarely had problems. So the patient has been very healthy. We haven't had conflicts very much in our region, which some people in the West call Middle East. I prefer to call Western Asia or the Arab world. But anyways, we have been relatively peaceful. Some of you are looking at me like, did they give them enough coffee? We're talking about the Middle East. They're always fighting, right? No, practically, if you look at what's happening, what happened here, we have a conflict now. If you take away this conflict, we'd have to go back to the Crusaders to find another conflict that's about the 11th, 12th century AD. What happened between those two conflicts, the Crusaderism and Zionism, which both came from Europe, and there's also something wrong with Europe. But anyways, what happened between those? Nothing. Peace. You drop a pin, you hear. Palestine has been a peaceful country. Our conflicts came from outside, not from inside. And our country has always been multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural, and even multilingual. Before 1948, before the establishment of this renegade so-called State of Israel, we had 44 languages spoken in Palestine. This picture here is from Palestine 100 years ago. where these religious and secular leaders got together to object to the idea of Zionism. So this brings us to the issue, which is Zionism. So after a doctor takes your demographics and judges you haven't had a chronic or congenital problem, if you want, then the doctor asks you, okay, let's talk about when this problem started that you have now. And it turns out it has an Australian connection, British connection. Surprise? No. I mean, the British Empire in 1840s hired the services of this guy, Lieutenant Colonel George Gawler, they say. There's a city named after him in Australia. He was governor of South Australia, second governor of South Australia. They hired him to look into the feasibility of doing this. And he came up with this treaty, which you can read its title, about Jewish colonization. Palestine was served with the British Empire. And the British Parliament passed this in 1847. There were some objections in the British Parliament. Two of the objectors were the only two Jewish members of Parliament, who basically said, what do you want to do to us? Ship us through this Palestine, wherever it is, like you shipped those criminals to Australia or penal colonies? We don't want that. So they objected. But the British government approved the program, allocated money for it, and started importing Jewish support for us, because Gawler told them the first thing you have to do is get enough Jewish support for it. So that's what they did. And this is what Zionism is. What is Zionism? It's a political idea, came in the mid-19th century, as you see. Really didn't pick up steam until the Balfour Declaration 1917. And so for over 60 years, it was pretty much dead in the water, despite the valiant efforts of Ted Herzl Jr., because Ted Herzl Sr., before him, his father, was a Zionist, convinced by Gawler. Once they got this program going, so to speak, everybody, including the British Empire, the early Jewish and Christian supporters of this program, everybody knew, and the Palestinians knew very early on what it means. What it means is the removal of the local people. This is logical, not good, bad, or evil. I don't care to use these terminologies, but it's logical. If you want to take a country that's 97% not Jewish, 3% only indigenous Jews, and that's multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, multilingual, and make it a uniform Jewish state, a monoculture, mono-religion, mono this, mono that, what does it mean for the indigenous people? They have to go. Everybody knew that, everybody. And everybody acted accordingly. The British Empire actually removed the first two Palestinian villages in 1880, believe it or not, 1880. So our Nakba didn't start in 1948, although it's identified with the year 1948. Our Nakba started from that early 1880, when the first two Zionist colonies were established, Petah Tikva and Rishon LeZion, replaced two Palestinian towns that were there under the Ottoman Empire and with British support. Of course, in 1948, the situation accelerated. So you can see the red dots on this map are all the Palestinian villages and towns that were depopulated in 1948. And there were 534 of these towns and villages. And if you want more details, you can read Ilan Pape's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. This process of ethnic cleansing continues to this day. It's a meticulous process that engaged, and now, of course, in the Gaza Strip, there's large-scale ethnic cleansing, so it didn't start in 1948, it didn't end in 1948. It's a meticulous process, sort of like what happened in the United States with the indigenous people. Actually, I mean, how many of you have seen a shrinking map of Palestine? Raise your hand, please. A lot of you have seen it. Do you know the origin of it? Who first drew it? It was my son when he was 13 years old, middle school, in North Carolina, who showed me a map like the one below for the United States. And he said, "Dad, isn't this what happened to your country?" And I said, "No, son, this is what happened to your country." He said, "Well, shouldn't we draw a map like this for Palestine?" I said, "No, shouldn't you draw a map?" Anyway, he drew the first one in 1998, and it has gone viral. As you see, everybody saw it, even here in Queenstown. But anyway, no copyright, don't worry. This is not unusual in colonization, okay? That's why I say no copyright. It's, you know, you can draw a map like this for Australia, for example. You can draw a map like this for South Africa. How did the South African blacks under apartheid ended up in 11.5% of the land of South Africa, as you see, what was called Bantustans at the time, where they kept the black people. Actually, in our case, it's less than what was in South Africa. It's worse than what was in South Africa. It's 8.3%. Actually, maybe now it's 8.1%, considering the past few years. This is what they call displacement settler colonialism. This is the diagnosis. Please remember this. And why it's important to make the right diagnosis, because if you make the wrong diagnosis, you could be killing the patient by treating them for the wrong diagnosis. Okay? You have to make the right diagnosis. Now, how do you know that this is the right diagnosis? Well, I mean, there are other diagnoses, plural, given for our struggle. For example, religious conflict, or military occupation, or dispute over borders, or land, or whatever. You can come up with other diagnoses. How do good doctors eventually agree on your diagnosis if you go with an illness for a doctor? We used to have pathology conference when I was at Yale University. We sit down every Friday, discuss patient cases. And some doctor says, this is this. And another doctor says, no. You see, this symptom doesn't fit this. So we discuss. I'll give you one symptom to show you that this is the right diagnosis. This is a symptom from my own village. A simple symptom. In 1988, my village, May the Tāhuna, the Shepherd's Field, engaged in a revolt called the Cow Revolt. Why the cow revolt? Because we brought 18 cows against an Israeli military order that says we cannot own milking cows. Palestinians cannot own milking cows. We can own milking goats and milking mice, but not milking cows. So the Israeli military discovered these milking cows, and my cousin was the leader of this rebellion of cows. And my cousin, the Israeli military officer, came to him, saw these cows, said, you have 24 hours to kill the cows or get rid of them, because you're not allowed to have cows. Well, you know, they negotiated and he gave them 48 hours. 48 hours came and the military came back and there's no cows. What? Where's the cows? We don't know anything about cows. So the Israeli military started military operation. They have to name their operations. So they called it Operation Hunt Cow. Literally, to find these fugitive terroristic cows supplying this substance called MILK to the children. Okay? Now, if you think of this symptom alone, that helps you make the diagnosis. Because would this symptom fit, for example, religious conflict? It wouldn't. The cows are not religious to my knowledge. The owners of the cows, as I told you, 70% of our villages Christian, 30% Muslim. And they were all in on the crime of smuggling the cows. So it doesn't fit a religious conflict. Does it fit, for example, a military occupation? No. Why would the military occupier prevent you from having cows? You know, Germany occupied France for many years. The US occupies Iraq even until today. They didn't tell the Iraqis, you can't have cows, or the French for that matter. So it doesn't fit these other diagnoses. Does it fit settler colonialism? Absolutely, like these beautiful white settlers, bringing knowledge and wisdom and technology and brightness and manifest destiny and shiny city on a hill, killed 2 to 3 million of these creatures called buffaloes in the United States. Why did they kill the buffaloes? Because they're food for the native people. They don't want the native people. They don't want the indigenous people. So it makes sense, logically, okay? Now, in our case, of course, this colonization, like other colonizations, has hundreds, thousands of symptoms, and I wrote books about these subjects, and I don't want to bore you with details of symptoms, because they are very many, you know, including the violence, of course. Colonization is violence. I cannot come to a nice house, villa here or whatever in Queenstown and say, hey, nice house, kindly please move away and I'm taking it free from you. It doesn't happen. You know, it's logically you have to use violence. So violence is intrinsic to colonization. Now, I do want to talk about why Gaza now and what's happening in Gaza, because this is important, Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is this tiny part of Palestine, about 3% of the land mass of Palestine. The Gaza Strip and the West Bank are together 22% of Palestine. These were occupied in 1967 in the second stage of expansion of the Zionist project. And Gaza Strip, unlucky for us, they discovered gas fields off of Gaza. And this was about 25 years ago. And in these 25 years, Israel blockaded Gaza, starved Gaza, literally destroyed Gaza. So this had nothing to do with what happened October 7. They said, actually, before October 7, there were 5 other attacks on Gaza. Israel even tested its weapons on Gaza so that they can export them. Israel is the 5th largest weapons exporter in the world. And so they need this testing laboratory, as one Israeli documentarian wrote a book about it called the Gaza Laboratory. It's to test weapons. But also, we don't want the Gazan population to have access to this gas. So the gas fields are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and Israel is already exporting gas from Gaza Strip to Europe to replace the Russian gas that used to flow, as you know, from Russia to Northern Europe through Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2, which mysteriously blew up. Acts of God, of course. We don't know who did it. All the intelligence services of the West who can find the pin in a haystack cannot tell us who did this. But anyway, so now Europe can import its gas from the Gaza Strip. And that's why the Gaza fishermen were not allowed to go more than 6 nautical miles to fish in the sea. This is again before October 7. Why? Why 6 nautical miles? Because at 7 nautical miles, you get the gas fields, and I don't want any government people coming close to their gas fields. This is one reason why Gaza. It's a very important reason. There's another reason. Gaza is important strategically for Israel. As you see, Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, explained it beautifully, both at the United Nations with English maps and in Israeli television, as you see here with Jewish Israeli maps. He said, we will become dominant in the Middle East, And we will connect Asia to Europe, as you see, the line passing through what he calls Israel. And we will have Saudi Arabia to normalize with us, just like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain did this. So we will have this corridor which replaces the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which connects China to Europe through countries like Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Turkey. Hence, you see, this is why they need Palestine without Palestine, without this nagging Palestinian population that insists on its rights. And hence the genocidal statements. Again, the genocidal statements, which happened both before October 7 and after October 7. October 7, what happened on October 7, what we Palestinians call the Gaza Ghetto Uprising, sort of like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Gaza Ghetto Uprising is important. It has people getting out of this concentration camp of Gaza. 2.3 million people in the Gaza Strip, you know, in this tiny strip of land along the Mediterranean. 2.3 million people in an area that you could fit in just the area of Queensland, in Queenstown here, you know, just around the lake if you want. It's not a very large area. And it has 70% of its population as refugees from 1948. They could literally see their houses across the fence that's built around the concentration camp they live in. But this is why there needs to be genocide, according to the Zionist planners, and they said so. They said so in statement after statement after statement. And not only did they say so, they acted on it, killing people, literally, like this, you know, children, shooting at children, etc. Mass graves that are now over 15,000 children, 15,600 children had been issued death certificates, and there is another 5,000 or so children still under the rubble. So it's over 20,000 children who have been killed. Or you see images like this with carpet bombings of Gaza. 70% of the residential buildings of Gaza were destroyed. This is just extending a small list of these people killed, just to show you this is a Hassouna family, because I know a member of the Hassouna family, an adult who survived. This is the people killed from age 1 to 17 of the Hassouna family, over 35. I'll skip some of those slides. There is also starvation, of course, in Gaza, because Israel denied food, denied medicine. Now nearly 1 million Gazans have diseases like hepatitis and intestinal diseases and lung disorders, and are dying of starvation. Children don't have even baby formula to eat. Their mothers are either dead, or if their mothers are alive, they can't nurse them because there's no food. So no milk, obviously, is being produced. There has been targeting of journalists in Gaza to kill any eyewitnesses, so to speak, but this is not working for Israel because everybody has cell phones now with video cameras and regular cameras, and they can record their own death even. I've seen video, actually, of medical doctors who were recording their own bombing, basically. They said the bombs are getting closer to us, and suddenly you hear this explosion, the camera is still recording on the floor. So anyways, the targeting of hospitals in Gaza, there's not, there were 36 hospital medical facilities in Gaza. 21 of them were destroyed. The other 15 are functioning only now as first aid centers because no medicines are allowed into Gaza. Even anesthesia is not allowed into Gaza. There are 1,100 cases of amputations without anesthesia that happen. Half of them are children. You can imagine cutting off a limb of a child without anesthesia. Sorry. The destruction of cultural and religious heritage. Over 290 mosques were destroyed, 3 churches were destroyed, including the 3rd oldest church in our country and maybe in the world, 3rd oldest church after Church of Nativity and Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The universities have all been destroyed in Gaza. 95,000 higher education students have no education now. Other symptoms of settler colonialism is the environmental symptom. For example, when they destroyed these villages I showed you earlier on the map and the red dots, they bulldozed all the fields around them, all the trees, indigenous trees, be it domesticated trees like olives and figs and almonds, or wild trees like hawthorn and oaks and carobs. They bulldozed all of that, and they did plant one kind of tree, monoculture, emblematic of Zionism, by the way. We saw of colonialism in general. I mean, you saw pine trees here also, European pine trees. They give a European look to the country, if you want. So they planted these pine trees, and the problem with pine trees in our climate, dry climate, you can see they are easily lit, the fires are there, and in this case in West Jerusalem, the fires burned the pine trees, but you can see that exposed the terraces that our ancestors built, agricultural terraces. Other environmental symptoms, so in addition to a genocide of people, there's an ecocide, there's a killing of nature. This is another example of it, the diversion of the water of the Jordan River basin from Lake Tiberias in the north to the west. And you can see this dried up the Jordan River and it resulted in desertification in our region. And then the River Jordan is no longer a river. It used to flow at 1,350 million cubic meters per year. It's now flowing at 20 million cubic meters per year. It's barely a stream that you could walk across or even jump across it. It's no problem. The reason they do this, by the way, the reason they steal our water is not because they need water. We have no shortage of water in Palestine. We have plenty of water. There's more rainfall in Ramallah, as you see here, than there is in London. But the difference is that the water in London goes in the aquifer, comes back, uses to feed London. In our case, they steal the water from the aquifer, for example, and not just to feed colonial, illegal Jewish settlements, but to just throw it out because they don't want us to have it. That's a form of starvation of the local people. This happened also with the drainage of the wetlands in the Hula area in the north. When they removed 12 Palestinian communities, these 3 Palestinian women, as you see, were harvesting reeds from the wetlands. They removed these people. But drying the wetlands also resulted in the disappearance of 219 aquatic species of animals. This is next to my house, Jabal Abu Ghnaim. It was the only forested area between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And you can see what it looks like at the top in 1997 and what it looks like at the bottom as a Jewish-only colony built on stolen Palestinian land, including from my own relatives. So, you know, this is what they call ecocide. And it's a natural symptom of colonization. You expect colonizers to do this. I'm going to skip a few slides just for the sake of time. So we cover the patient history, some of the symptoms. Again, I don't want to cover all the symptoms or even a fraction of the symptoms. We said what the diagnosis is, which is displacement settler colonialism. That leaves you with 2 things, as I said, modern pillars of medicine, therapy, and prognosis. Prognosis, you can choose one of those 3 scenarios. There's the Algeria scenario where 1 million French packed their bags and went to France. I don't say back to France because some of them for 6, 7, or 8 generations in Algeria. Some of them have never seen France in their lives. It was very bloody, 1.5 million Algerian lives. This is a consensus number. Some Algerians tell me 3 million Algerians. That's a genocide. This is very rare to happen, traumatic for all who is concerned. They included also, by the way, 100 to 150,000 French who were lost in that spring. So, that's one scenario, very, very rare. You don't find it common. Second scenario is outright genocide model, where you leave 1 or 2% of the local population, like happened in the US and Australia, maybe a couple of other countries. The third model is the most common model for post-colonial history, and that is that the descendants of the colonizers and the descendants of the colonized live in one country. Those remaining colonized people, remain. You could argue this country is an example of this. You could argue all of South America, all of Central America, Caribbean islands, North America, Mexico and Canada, all of Europe, all of Asia if you want. These are the scenarios. Since the third one is the most common outcome of this illness of colonization, then I expect that for Palestine that's also going to be the outcome, on a probability basis alone. There is no fourth scenario. No fourth scenario. Please, those of you who have heard your Prime Minister say, we support a two-state solution, that's a delusion or an illusion, not a solution to colonization. Never happened in the past, will never happen in the future. If you want to know why, I don't have time to explain here in detail, but you can look at, maybe in the question and answer, I can give you an example or two, why not? But you can look at my website, Qumsiyeh.org. It has my book, Sharing the Land of Canaan, which at Shrieking Map first appeared in public form. You can read it on my website. Again, I'm not a big fan of copyright. My editor doesn't like this, but still be there. All right, so that leaves one thing we haven't covered, which is therapy. And what is therapy in colonial and anti-colonial struggles? Just like illnesses. If you got the COVID-19, and I'm sure all of you have got COVID-19, whether you knew it or not. What was the key element to it is your own immune system, the B and T cells. If you had a healthy immune system, you're okay. So resistance is the key to this. Having a strong immune system is very key to succeeding, having a healthier outcome. And incidentally, none of these three outcomes is good outcome. Even the third one, the least violence, is not perfect outcome. It's not kumbaya, we live in. No, it's a work in progress. Just like any disease you get, it leaves remnants in your body, including COVID-19. So resistance is critical. And for us Palestinians, resistance is not an option. Resistance is existence is resistance. We have to resist, or like the frog, we get swallowed, we're gone. And so it is natural to have resistance. And what is resistance? Unfortunately, in Western media, they want to associate all of the resistance with one tiny form of resistance. Resistance in all colonial and anti-colonial struggles is a bell-shaped curve of resistance. There's armed resistance here, some of it extremely violent, and tiny percentage, but most of it is non-violent. And then there's also what my so-called alleged president, Mahmoud Abbas, says, I'm engaged in diplomatic resistance, okay? I'm talking to the enemy. You know, okay, I mean, I don't want to argue with him, but it's on the other end of the curve, you know? diplomatically. You know, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but if you don't exert pressure, meaningful pressure on the colonizers, they're not going to give you your rights back, right? It's logic. So the majority of the resistance in the bell-shaped curve is that middle of the bell-shaped curve, which is, I wrote a book about it called Popular Resistance in Palestine. Why popular resistance? We don't use the term non-violent resistance. Same reason that Mahatma Gandhi refused to use the term non-violent resistance. When he was asked about it, he said that's a negative terminology. And I'm not doing my resistance so that I oppose the people who engage in violent resistance. I'm doing my resistance as a positive action. It's called satyagraha and ahimsa. It's a positive action. So in Arabic we call it muqawma sha'biyya. Popular resistance is the closest translation to it. And for us in Palestine, when I'm drinking this water, and I have to drink water now, when I'm drinking this water here, it's not a form of resistance. Well, maybe talking to you is a form of resistance, and I may be questioned on the way back for what I told you. But in Palestine, when I'm drinking water, I'm engaged in resistance. Because the Israelis don't want me in Palestine, period. They don't want me to educate my children. They don't want me to teach students at the university. They don't want us to do anything. They want us to get the hell out of their Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, the Jewish land as they call it. So everything we do is a form of resistance. And we have an institute, my wife Jessie, who is back there somewhere, raise your hand, Jessie. There she is. She and I returned to Palestine about 15, 16 years ago, and we started this institute called Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, whose vision is sustainable human and natural communities. And we do a lot of activities around this area in research, in education, animal rehabilitation, food sovereignty. We have community gardens, we grow vegetables and so forth. Even people from the refugee camp, including children, come and grow things. We work with children a lot to empower them, to make them successful, etc. This is our mobile educational unit, which was functioning, reaching marginalized communities, including Bedouin communities in areas like Khan al-Ahmar, also marginalized villages like in Masafir Yatla in the south that are targeted for ethnic cleansing. Unfortunately, this was basically shut down October 7 because they locked us in Bethlehem ghetto or concentration camp. We have a museum of natural history and a museum of ethnography. We work with children a lot to educate them. We work with women to empower them to produce their own food products and sell them, also produce their own even soaps and cosmetics and everything else. This is what we do in the Institute. We welcome volunteers. Any of you want to come and volunteer with us, you would be more than welcome. You can either work in the garden, pick olives. Today I was very happy to see an olive tree, by the way. And, thanks to Catalina who took us over there, and she also picked us up at the airport yesterday. Thank you, by the way, the organizers. Magnificent work. So if you want to come and volunteer, we eat good food. You can do work to help us in the gardens or whatever. This is what the Institute will look like next year. We're building this now, renovation and building. And we've raised 70% of the money we need for this. So also, if you want to donate towards that, we welcome your donation. But don't worry about it. You can't afford to donate. You can also donate your time by volunteering, even long distance. If you don't want to come there, you don't feel comfortable, you can volunteer long distance, helping us with research, with outreach or other areas. Finally, I want to end with this picture. Because I'm from Bethlehem, my family actually happens to be a Palestinian Christian family. So Bethlehem is where Jesus was born, and if you want to know what Jesus would look like, his mother, this woman from Gaza, in the front of her ruined house would be what Mother Mary and baby Jesus would look like. It just captivated me, this picture, just really. But anyways, the QR code, which I'll pass this QR code, you can scan it and be on our email list. And if you don't want to scan, you can put your name on the back. There's a pen here. But if you put your name in writing, please make it legible, or you will never hear from me again. So, anyways, lost many of my friends in the West Bank and now in Gaza, of course. Many friends. This is one of them, by the way. His name is Basil Large. Here he's wearing a T-shirt that I've given him called "Fight a Boycott, Palestinian Sanctions." He was found, with 26 holes in his body, bullets. Maybe this is a good quote also to put there. What is it that we want? What we want is to end colonialism and Zionism, just like the African Charter says, that we want to end all forms of discrimination. All forms of discrimination. We are as much against any anti-Jewish discrimination, Islamophobia, or hatred of Arabs, or anything, discrimination against anybody. Because if there is a message I want you to remember, that diversity is strength, human diversity. Remember that picture I showed you of Palestinian secular and religious leaders? Diversity. And diversity is strength, human diversity and biological diversity. Colonialism is an enemy of both, human diversity and environmental or eco diversity or biological diversity. So I'll stop here, and I have a short video which I can show you now, or I can show you after a question and answer. It's up to the organizers. Short video is about 6.5 minutes. So
I think it'd be great to do a video first. Yeah.
I think the issue is really to abolish discrimination, as I mentioned, and then in the form of government becomes obvious, democracy for all its people. I wrote a book on, go on.
Your facility that you just showed the video of, where is that located?
I'm sorry?
The video of the facility.
You can just look for it on the Palestine Museum of Natural History.
No, I mean, where is it located?
The institute where it's located in Bethlehem.
Have you faced any...
Part of Bethlehem University, yeah.
Have you faced any hurdles or pushback since the recent events in the construction of the building?
Not so far in terms of the construction, no. Because we are in Area A of the West Bank, which is, according to the Oslo process, small part of the West Bank. You get permission not from the Israelis but from the Palestinian Authority.
Has there been any sort of...
But there is pushback against us, if you want, in terms of restrictions and stuff. I had several volunteers who were denied entry. If you want to volunteer, by the way, you need to come as a tourist. You cannot say, I'm coming to volunteer in the occupied territories. I'll put you on the next plane back. So, even importing material that we need, like books and chemicals for the laboratories. We have a DNA laboratory to do environmental DNA. A lot of things are forbidden for us, and we literally have to smuggle them against Israeli wishes. Sometimes with the help of some Israeli Jewish friends who have a different color license plate who can bring stuff home. So, yeah, it's not easy. But we must keep going. Yes, please.
What do you think people like us here who, like, what can we do to help the fight for Palestinian people? Like, what issues are us effectively we can do?
Good question. I mean, obviously your attendance here indicates my interest, and that's the first thing you can do is educate yourself about the situation, be able to defend your support of human rights, because the Zionists don't have the truth on their side, so that what do they have? Instead, they start to attack people and label you anti-Semite, for example, for speaking out for human rights. Which is nonsense, of course, because many of the demonstrators in the world are Jewish. In fact, the leading of the demonstrations at the campuses in the US, for example, were the ones who led the blockage of the San Francisco Bay Bridge or Grand Central Station in New York are Jewish students, Jewish young people. So I think you cannot let them try to intimidate you. And to do that effectively, you need knowledge, you need background, you need resources. So education is important. After you get educated, you have to act on this knowledge, because knowledge alone is not sufficient. And action, there are thousands of forms of action. You can read my book on popular resistance in Palestine, because it lists examples historically where Palestinians and others in joint struggles supported us. There's boycott, divestment, sanctions, for example. There's media work. There's you can organize events like this. The organizers who did this obviously are acting. So reach out to your neighbors, your friends, educate them. But most of the time I tell people, just do what you are good at. If you like music, for example, do music for resistance. If you like poetry, do poetry for resistance, or whatever. I mean, there's a Buddhist saying to have joyful participation in the sorrows of this world. The key word here is participation. The worst thing you can do is have knowledge and be apathetic. That's the worst thing. But, in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad that says, if you can change something by hand, then you do it. If not by your tongue, then you do that. And if not, at least by your heart, and that's the least of the faith, is that you act. The important thing is to act. So, my wife and I are dedicating our lives. We're now full-time volunteers at this institution 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. We don't take vacations. Today was an exceptional thing. We took half a day, one from today. I do for a nice boat ride and seeing sheep being sheared. Yeah, listen.
E mura I ka ki o te mura I ka ki tai te kora ina ai ka. Ka mihi koa ke ki ka tukuna no hawa I nei whine ora whipai a wea waita a muia ki nā a māmoia waita ui. Ka mihi koa ke kia. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Norman. I'm a sheep farmer's son from just down the road, and I travelled to Christchurch on Monday to feel grateful, and I've come here to Youth Talk and appreciate the strength and integrity of your people and the breadth and depth of your work. And I began learning Māori 32 years ago down here, and that got me interested in other Indigenous people. Currently learning 7 languages, but I discovered my mother and grandfather were linguists, and my grandfather was a nurse in the 40s who's at least an age that he learned Arabic, so I will shortly be studying Arabic. And I'd like to go to Palestine to do some helpful volunteering and Shukran.
I invite all of you to come volunteer with us, or at least tour Palestine. Don't come all at one time. No, it would be more work. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the thought. There was a point when you mentioned the gas fields off of Gaza. The gas resources that you mentioned off of Gaza. Gas.
Yes.
Yeah. You said that there was some insinuation of that being the driver for Europe and the U.S. Could you peel that back a little bit and maybe tell us what your thoughts are on that?
I mean, always when there's conflict and war anywhere in the world, always follow the money. To me, that is, you can see who profits. Ukraine, for example. If you want to know who profits, look at the prices of stocks of companies like Raytheon or like General Electric or like Halliburton. Their stock prices since the invasion of Ukraine started. They're making money. That's who profits, The same thing here. You think, the Israeli public is profiting? No, there are still companies in Israel, including ones that Netanyahu and his corrupt leadership had investments in. The last war in Gaza, I remember this very vividly because I was in Palestine. In 2008, there was an attack on Gaza. The same year I came back to Palestine. And they had the cabinet meeting about planning it and starting it. And the first thing two of the ministers did when they left the meeting of the room was go call their stockbrokers. That's the first thing they did, not call their wives and family and whatever. Calling their stockbroker to see about how they make money off of the coming war, This is reality of who these people who benefit, So I think we really have to understand now the oil, the gas sector. Don't misunderstand. As a biologist, as an environmentalist, I'm not for hydrocarbons. I'm for alternative forms of energy. But there are hundreds of billions of dollars of hydrocarbons that are being stolen, basically, from Palestinians and being sold to Europe to replace Russian gas. There's geopolitics at play here, and geopolitics is important. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I just want to make everybody aware there is a website called Who Profits. Correct, Mazin?
Yeah.
Who Profits. There's an organization, and you have a lot of information you can find out who profits from all those activities. Also, can you tell us about our visit with politician in New Zealand and Australia, and people here needs to continue to give pressure to your government. That's one way to help the human rights in all over the world, including Palestine.
Yeah, we have met with parliamentarians in Australia, in the capital, and we met in Wellington with some parliamentarians. We met also with the foreign ministry, and we talked to them. Jesse and I talked to them. The problem with politicians around the world is they do this. They stick their finger in the air to see where the wind is blowing. And we have to provide them with a hurricane to get them to change their views on things or really affect positive change. And, you actually have a very good chance here of influencing policies. It's a small country. You don't have as many lobbyists here as you have in Australia or the US. That are lobbying your parliament or whatever. So I think it's possible for you to affect policy. What I propose actually to the foreign ministry and to these parliamentarians here in this country is the following. I said, stop talking about two-state solutions and start talking about human rights. And insist that Israel follows human rights. That's number one. Number two is, you are on the right side in the South Africa apartheid system. You need to be on the right side of history here. You cannot be on the side of oppressors and criminals and genocidal maniacs and apartheid regime. That is, history will never forgive you for. You have history rejecting nuclear things in this country. Certainly you can stand up for your own foreign policy even against the United States. So what are you afraid of taking that position? The third thing I told them is that they can set an example for the other Western countries by doing number one and number two. Because they can say, okay, look, there is a history of colonization around the world. There's not a single country that escaped. But here, in our country here, we don't try to solve our colonization history by telling the Maoris they all have to move to a part of South Island and have their own state there, and the rest of the country, 70, 80 or 90% of it, is for the white people. That's not how you solve the problem. You solve the problem as you are doing it. So you're doing it by a process of decolonization. May not be complete yet, you still have struggle to go through, but you provide an example. So you go to the Western country and say, look, this is what we are doing in this country, and we are providing you with a model, and we would like to decolonize the whole world. Sorry. It could start a domino effect later. You could start a domino effect from your country here. You could be that light unto the nations, if you like. By doing this, by insisting on human rights, by insisting on not just subjugating yourself to Australian or Canadian or American policy or anything. No, you have your independence, you have your policy to affect your politicians, make them take the right choices, make them do the right thing. And the first thing they have to do is stop this madness, this genocidal madness, literally. I mean, it's crazy when they drop bombs on the refugee camp in Rafah.
Yeah.
Tents. People are living in tents, say in Syria. 75 people have died of burns. This is madness. Children, women, most of them are children. Most of the victims, 72%, are women and children. That's not acceptable in the 21st century. And I also told these politicians that according to your own laws, because when you sign agreements like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, like the Convention Against the Crime of Apartheid, like the Convention Against the Crime of Genocide, when you sign such laws, and New Zealand signed them, they become local laws. You have to obey them. You have to obey them. So, as local laws, you implement your own laws. Your laws are very clear about human rights, no discrimination based on religion. So why do you agree to have an embassy for a state that calls itself a Jewish state and that says any Jew in the world is an automatic citizen, can become an automatic citizen, is considered a national even before they come to Israel? Every Jew in the world, whether they want it or not, is a member of this Jewish nation, have a right to come and be automatic citizenship at the airport, And meanwhile, the indigenous people don't have any rights. Period. They don't have any rights simply because they are Christian or Muslim or Baha'i or Druze and are living in refugee camps in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, or even inside the country. That's racism. Israel passed a law in the Knesset. It should be, when that law passed, they should have been censored around the world. The law says Israel is a nation state of the Jewish people and only the Jewish people. Only the Jewish people have a right to self-determination in this country. What does that mean? Imagine somebody doing that in any other country. Only the Christian people have a right to self-determination in this country. Or only the Muslim, or only the whatever. Nobody would accept that. If the country is mixed, you have to accept that those other people have rights. If they reject that right, there are 65 laws that discriminate against non-Jews who are even holding the Israeli ID card, the blue ID card. I don't happen to be one of those. There are millions of us holding the green ID card. For those holding the green ID cards, Palestinians under Israeli occupation, we have hundreds of laws that discriminate against us, including the law that says I, as a Palestinian from Bethlehem, cannot visit my holy sites in Jerusalem, cannot go to Jerusalem, which is only 5 kilometers away. You know, why? Because I used to be a high school teacher in Jerusalem. Why can't I go to Jerusalem? You know? This is racist law, but there are hundreds of such laws. And that's for those carrying the green ID cards. For those carrying the blue ID cards, 65 laws. Other questions? Yes.
Do you have any reason to expect a similar attack on the West Bank?
Yes, I mean, the first letter I got on October 7, in the morning, by the way, 1 hour after news broke out of what happened in the Gaza ghetto uprising, I received an email from the Zionist guy. And he says, get ready, we're coming to the West Bank. And my recommendation to you, this is his words, go to Jordan. Go to Jordan. The very next day, he sent me another email. He said, on second thoughts, don't go to Jordan, go back to the United States, because we're coming for Jordan too. This is his words. I can show you the email. This is, this is indeed what happened. Immediately after October 7, Israel declared the state of war throughout the territories, and they locked us in our own ghettos. I'm in the Bethlehem ghetto. Bethlehem ghetto is 260,000 Palestinians. About 30% of us are refugees in Bethlehem from 1948 areas. And we are allowed to use only 15% of the land of the district of Bethlehem. The rest of it is now mushrooms of colonial settlements. And not only did they lock us in our canton of Bethlehem, but they also unleashed the settlers. You know, they gave them weapons, told them, go kill Palestinians. And this is what the Jewish colonial settlers are doing, injuring, killing, and burning cars and doing pogroms in Palestinian villages and towns regularly, especially in refugee camps and in the marginalized Palestinian villages that are isolated, don't have a very large Palestinian population around them. So that's what's happened. And in parallel with that, they used the fog of war, if you want, to establish more Jewish colonies in Palestinian land, stealing more land and building more colonial settlements. Thousands and thousands were built around Bethlehem only in the past 8 months. Tenders were issued for thousands of settlements. So yeah, it's impacting us, of course. And it's going to get worse. In Jenin, they went into the refugee camp and started doing infrastructure destruction. They bring these bulldozers that just destroy the houses and the roads. They dig the roads and the infrastructure and the damage. Let's still had somebody in the back. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. The video you showed, it seems so joyful that what you are growing with your centre is growing joy and so life-giving and woven with the land. And that seems, incomparably valuable, especially amidst everything which is happening. And there were these the shots of people looking at the birds. And I wanted to ask you, does the centre work with bird conservation? And have you been noticing what's happening to the migrating birds over the last few months with the swifts that come from Africa and through Palestine and then onto Europe? And can the bird networks around the world and the climate networks give solidarity to what you're doing?
I mean, this is precisely what our institute is doing. It's not only an oasis for the local people of calm and hope in the middle of this mayhem that's around us, but it is an essential component of our struggle. As I go speak around the world about environmental issues, as we publish research papers, you can go on our website, palestinenature.org, and the research tab. You can see the papers that we published. For example, the last paper I published in March was about the impact of wars on the environment, using Gaza as an example. We have now ability to do things like investigate the impact of these things on the environment. And maybe some people don't care about human lives, they care about the environment. So then that's okay. We can convince them that way. We can reach out to them that way. So our work is indeed highly needed. And we have been in high demand. I mean, I tell you, every day I get requests for speaking engagements. I don't have time for everything, but there's, in all our speaking engagements, as you see, turned out with the overcapacity of the rooms. It is important what we are. You can help us with this. For example, if you have remote sensing knowledge, you can help us with remote sensing now for Gaza to look at the impact of removal of vegetation cover. My initial, just quick guesstimation, I would guesstimate that about 90% of the vegetation of Gaza was removed, but we need papers, we need research papers. So we do things scientifically, and this drives the Zionists nuts because we publish in peer-reviewed journals. They cannot argue against it as science. So we're telling the truth and we're explaining what the impact of these things are. And sometimes this also helps us reach Israeli citizens. For example, the other day I was explaining to some Israelis about how their government is doing some things that damage their own health. For example, when they denied electricity to Gaza, again, not since October 7, long before that. It used to be 1 hour a day if you're lucky to get electricity in Gaza. And you cannot operate sewage treatment facilities without 24-hour electricity. You know? So what happens to all the sewage of Gaza? It goes down into the Mediterranean Sea. And what happens there is with the currents coming from the Suez Canal up the coast, literally the sewage of Gaza is going up to Jaffa and Tel Aviv, and Israeli citizens are swimming in the shit of Gaza because the government is stupid. This is what they do. We have to educate about these things. We have to reach the many advice. Yes.
Hi, just on and on from that. There are some Israeli people I know who are living in Palestine at the moment, and they are giving a bit of pushback to any activism that I'm doing about this, or any time I speak about it. And I'm wondering what your advice might be on how to engage with them. I don't know what they've been taught about the situation and whether I think it's worked.
I mean, it's good to engage all people, regardless of who they are. First, we have to address the facts of what's going on. As I just gave an example of a fact they may not know. They may not know that, they may claim that we cannot live together. Well, I had an Israeli volunteer, I didn't point her out in the picture, who lived with us for 2 years. 2 years, Israeli Jewish volunteer. And she was going to the refugee camp right next to this institute, and she befriended some people there. And everywhere she went, she said, I'm an Israeli Jew. Did they lynch her? Did they attack her? No. She was welcome. They need to know this. They need to know that Palestinians are not these monsters that the Israeli government tries to portray us. As the Minister of Defense said, we deny them food and electricity and water because we're not dealing with humans, we're dealing with human animals. No, we're not. I mean, I am an animal. As a biologist, this anyway, I actually changed my Facebook profile, if you go there, right after he said that. I put the human animal. But that was double tongue in cheek, so to speak, challenging. But this is important. I think we need to reach them with knowledge. Many of them, by the way, they don't expose to you what they really are after, and you have to probe them a little bit to get what they are after. Sometimes by saying Hamas, 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 or terrorism, 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 they're trying to deflect the real thing that they want to really should be discussing, which is Israel good for the Jews? This is important. I think we should immediately jump and discuss that with them. Yeah. And many, many people in Israel who moved to become anti-Zionist or post-Zionist were able to deal with that question. For example, Jeff Help. You can give them books like this, but Jeff Help, an Israeli who came from the US as a settler, as a colonial right-wing settler, and changed his mind, became anti-Zionist. Or post-Zionist, at least. There's a difference, by the way, between post-Zionist and anti-Zionist. He stood in front of the United Nations and explained to the people why he changed his views. He said, Zionism promised us safety. But look, a Jew in Berlin today is safer than a Jew in Tel Aviv. You cannot get safety by oppressing another people. This is the real core of their thing. They try to deflect it by dehumanizing us. But you can go back and explain them. Show them this picture I showed you. The picture I showed you with Christian, Muslim, and other religious leaders had the Samaritan and had the Jewish rabbi. The chief rabbi of Jerusalem was opposed to Zionism. Why did the local Jews oppose Zionism? You can think about it. So I think we need to approach them. I recommend a book by a Jewish theologian called Mark Ellis. Tell them together. Mark, M-A-R-C, and Ellis, E-L-L-I-S. His book is titled, what?
Out of the Ashes?
Yeah, Out of the Ashes, about Jewish history, where he gently brings fellow Jews around the world to realize that Israel is not really good. Israel is the worst thing that happens to Judaism in 2,000 years. Really, I mean, think about it, that they wait 2,000 years to have F-16s with the Star of David bombing refugee camps and dropping, these 2,000-kilogram bombs on residential buildings. Is this what Judaism is about? It is really horrible. And they have to realize this. And, deflection is the biggest thing they need to get away from. Deflecting their thoughts by vilifying us. And it's not working anymore because, we're not listening, obviously. to consider ourselves subhuman. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Moh. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Nova Music Festival that took place on October 7th. I know it's going back, but it comes up in conversation with the community that have a part of here, whether it's through the music, through the dance, through festivals. And of course, I'm fully aware that there are numerous conspiracy theories potentially circulating regarding the Nova Festival. And I could mention those if anyone wasn't aware, but was it an inside job to give them fuel to come in hard and create what they set out to create, which was a land grab and ultimately genocide? What are your thoughts?
You're talking about October 7th,
Correct.
what happened on October 7th. Yes. I think there needs to be an independent investigation on what happened on October 7th. The evidence that is now available to us from Israeli sources showed that the Israeli military actually bombed their own civilians under the Hannibal Doctrine, which says that basically to prevent hostages being taken by anybody, you're willing to kill your own citizens together with the terrorists or whatever you want to call it. And this they have done. In 2 occasions there's evidence for it. One is from the helicopters that bombed those cars and stuff. And they couldn't distinguish. Of course, there's even audio recording that, the helicopter pilot said, well, I can't distinguish if any of these have any terrorists or not. And they told him, go ahead and shoot. So even people trying to run in their cars, they thought, well, maybe they're running in their cars, maybe they're Hamas people, because they are civilians, some of them dressed. Because it was not just Hamas, by the way, Hamas entered with the idea of kidnapping mostly soldiers. Then, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, they were more successful than I had thought. The Israeli military couldn't respond. 22 military positions were occupied in less than 2 hours. And for several hours afterwards, there's no soldiers to be seen. So civilians from Gaza started streaming in there, not Hamas controlled or anything. And some of them were in a vengeful mood and must have killed some Israeli civilians. Yeah. They know that. Yeah. And we know that some of them also wanted to kidnap civilians. And Hamas didn't want that. They don't want elderly people or children. Well, what they need those for? They have enough to trade for all the Palestinian prisoners. But in any way, what happened with the Israeli military, both from the helicopters and from one tank at least, that started shelling the kibbutz, because the kibbutz clearly houses were shelled by the Israeli military. Hamas didn't come in with weapons that could obliterate a house. So the helicopters and the tanks were that killed, that destroyed houses, sometimes with people inside who were burned also by the Israeli shelling, not by Hamas. But how many civilians were killed by Hamas, or people who streamed in after Hamas, and how many were killed by the Israeli military, by others, Israeli military or whoever? We don't have all the evidence. Israeli papers and Israeli journalists like Amira Hass and Gideon Levy estimate that half the civilians, at least, who were killed by the Israeli military. Half the Israeli civilians killed, including at that music festival. So, and you can tell that from the charring of the vehicles, they were strafed from above. They were not strafed from the ground level. And Hamas didn't have helicopters. So, it's sad. What happened on October 7, please don't misunderstand me, it's sad. But it's one day in which Israelis, in that one day, felt like Palestinians felt every single day for the past 76 years. That's 27,740 days in which we were subjected to what the Israelis, whether soldiers or civilians, felt on that day. And it doesn't matter by whom, it's still horrific, of course. And so for us, you know, to ignore all that history and say as if everything started October 7 is nonsense. You know, my own mother, by the way, lost her best friend in a massacre called Dar Yassin. Dar Yassin, my mother is Christian. This woman, her friend, her best friend, a teacher at college in Jerusalem, was a Muslim woman by the name of Hayab al-Bisi. Hayab al-Bisi was 18 years old when she was literally gunned down with her students in the school that she was teaching in Dar Yassin. This is April 1948. My mother even remembered her on her deathbed last year. So this didn't start October 7, and let's not just focus on what happened October 7 as if it's the end of the whole world kind of scenario. Other questions, or shall we try to wrap it up?
I think we might.
Okay.
I think
Just one quick question. If anybody here has an extra room for me and Jesse for tomorrow, and the next 3 nights, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Can we just give a bigger... Your wisdom and the way that you could just deliver us with so much information is, I think, we're also privileged to have been here. Thank you to the Rees who have actually hosted, let us have this event quickly. So all of our ticket sales will be going to the university, and a quick count is $460.